I can't take this to my grave without not. There's too many miracles. There's too many coincidences. There's too many, experiences that are God ordained. To take a little French Canadian kid out of rural Quebec and say, "Here, son, come. You're chosen." And for me to have been called and to have said yes to Jesus, wow, it's miraculous. The early days, back when I was born in the year 1956, Montreal was where I was born and raised, and grew up in a loving, caring family with 6 family siblings, and we played hockey. That was our go-to sport. I can remember playing hours on end in the backyard on our ice rink in the park, and playing till Mom called us home around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and we repeated those sports days, enjoying hockey during the winter, playing in organized sports, all outdoors. There was no such thing as an indoor arena. We just played on ice hockey outdoors, freezing and taking the snow off the ice, and everything revolved around watching the Montreal Canadiens. Jean Beliveau was the captain. They were winning Stanley Cups after Stanley Cups. Henri Richard was also on there. Claude Rousseau, or Bobby Rousseau was his name. It's going back a few years now. And Terry Harper, Doug Harvey, Serge Chavard. They were all elite athletes winning Stanley Cups. Montreal Canadiens was a religion in Quebec. So every Wednesday night was hockey night in Canada. Same with Saturday night, and everybody rallied around the television, and we all watched the Canadiens play. It was just a wonderful way to spend quality time with the family and watching hockey and playing it. And it was just what we did. We skied in the winter. But a turning point in our lives as a family, my parents had gone to pick up some ski equipment for us at my uncle's place to ski on the following day. It was a Friday night, March 13th, 1964, and lo and behold, we were all asleep. We had my cousin babysitting us, and got awoken with my sisters screaming at the top of their lungs. And oddly enough, I woke up and the whole house was on fire. And it's interesting that my parents, prior to that, had taught us a fire drill. And what are we to do if there was a fire? I don't know how that happened, but there was no packing your suitcase and getting out of the house. We were taught to just open the door and run out the door as fast as we could. So that's what we did. I can remember myself running down the street with 3 feet of snow and going to the neighbors, and our house burned down to the ground. So this was an interesting, pivotal moment in our family, because we then experienced really the generosity of community, especially the Red Cross. We had nothing left. There was no salvation at all, nothing that was salvageable. And we lived in a house until the house was rebuilt, with tremendous support from the community for food, clothing, shelter, and slowly began restoring the house, rebuilding the house, and eventually moved back into the house after about a year or so. It was rebuilt, and it's an interesting piece of my journey in the insurance business, because how would I become a fire underwriter at the age of 16 years old when our house burned down at the age of 8 years old? So here we are, 50 years later, and I'm living a destiny, a piece that I think needs to be shared as a true path for my life as an insurance broker. 50 years ago, I did have a vision that I was going to be here at this point in time. The goal was to stick in the insurance business, to develop a long-term career. And what got me here over the long term is our core values of integrity, honesty, trustworthiness, hard work, dedication, commitment, responsibility, seeking to exceed customer expectations. They were all part of that overall goal. My hope is to encourage and empower others to take hold of those core values so that they can continue the next legacy for the next generations, to carry those values that has brought me here after 50 years of service. Being the oldest of the kids, I can recall being responsible, helping my mom around the house while dad was at work. And with the siblings and brothers and sisters, I was responsible to make sure that everybody was attended to, cared for. I was a helper. I was responsible. I was someone that my mother could depend on. Both my parents were hard workers. And my dad was extremely hardworking, having to care for a family of 6 children. And my mother was an artist, you know. I still have a lot of paintings that she did. She just had that art bent as a whole. My mother was a lot on the emotional side, not mathematical. And we had a beautiful house. Everything. We were prim and proper the whole time. And she was so happy to see us all dressed up and, 6 kids all lined up, nice house, beautiful wife, organized. And I think maybe I've gotten a lot of my organizational skills from my mother. I remember as a young boy working on building models, car models. Most of them were car models. To this day, I am a car person. That gave me a little bit of an art gift, because then I transitioned that skill set over to drawing, and it eventually took on a different level. In high school, I was an art student. It gave me some teaching about creative intelligence and creative outlets to think outside the box, to focus on solutions and to think creatively. And I still do to this day. I can remember vividly looking at a picture of a dog and transferring that picture onto a piece of paper with a pencil. And I can remember really kind of working through that representation of that dog onto that piece of paper and erasing it and coming down and looking at it. And I think that developed a sense of tenacity, a sense of just dedication, of just like commitment and making sure that I would do a perfect job or that I would do a true representation. And I'd go and show it to my mom, and she just couldn't believe it. I had a lot of fun doing it because it was quiet time, it was reflective, and it was, a sense of accomplishment once you got it done. And I love that whole aspect of it. My grandfather was a painter, and I can remember as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, every summer, I'd be painting with Grandpa. And, he'd get you up early in the morning, 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, we were on the job. And, I slept on a cot in the living room. And that was my summers. My grandmother was a hard worker, and I think I got a lot of that from my grandmother. I spent quite a bit of time there. She was fastidious about her lawn, about her property, clean windows, a clean parking space, clean backyard, clean house, and to the extent that we had photographers stopping to take pictures at my grandmother's house. And so the two of them, they were just beautiful, simple people. And I retained a lot of the work ethic from them. The stewardship of whatever they had. They were simple. And to this day, I still maintain some of those same values. Less is more. I still, to this day, live in a 967 square foot bungalow. And I just love it. I just love the simplicity of life, of being organized, deaccumulate, declutter. It's just been part of Grandma and Grandpa's way of life. One of the other activities that we did as a family was camping. And we camped all the way through our childhood. We started in a little 6x6, 8x8 tent with sleeping bags. And as the family grew and we added more brothers and sisters, we moved to an 18-foot trailer. And, my dad would come home from work on the Friday and get everybody organized, and we'd go camping. Obviously, as the family grew, the trailer grew. And we ended up with a 26-foot trailer. And my dad had a big Oldsmobile Cutlass Vista Cruiser with a 455 horsepower engine, and we had the TV in the back seat, and we all packed in, and that was, back in the late 60s, early 70s, and fun times, traveled all over the place. So that was a responsibility piece as well, because I needed to be helpful, organizing the campsite and making sure that all of the chairs were out and the picnic tables and the awning that attaches to the trailer. And there was a lot of moving pieces, but I just had so much fun doing it, and I loved helping. The more I could help, the more I could be responsible for, the more I loved it. It allowed me the opportunity to transfer those skills into, managing an insurance brokerage. Thousands and thousands of clients, thousands of policies. So another important part of my life is a move to Toronto. And that occurred in 1969 at the age of 13 years old. My dad was bilingual, and he had been working for a large national firm, and he was offered a fabulous opportunity to move to Toronto and be responsible for a national sales function as national sales manager. And I guess my mom and my dad decided to move the family, and we had no knowledge of the English language. We were French Canadian living in rural Quebec. We were Montreal Canadian fans. We didn't even know about Toronto Maple Leafs. So this was a transformational change for our family as a whole. We had to learn English, went to a language school, and then integrated ourselves back into English Canada. So really, it was a very difficult time. We couldn't speak the language, and we were settling into Mississauga. We moved to Mississauga. I skipped grade 9, automatically into grade 10 in high school. And the rest of my brothers and sisters were integrated in their respective grades. And we struggled along for the next 4 or 5 years. I was the smallest kid in the school. Here we are, I'm in grade 10. I weigh all of about 85 pounds, and I'm trying to integrate myself into the school community, into the school body, but I can't speak any English, and I'm the smallest kid in the entire school. I wouldn't speak to anybody for the first year or so, because all I could do was just watch, and I couldn't speak, so it was just a matter of observing for quite a number of years. Fortunately, a teacher reached out. His name was Jim Thorpe, who was a science teacher, and asked if I wanted to be on the wrestling team. And actually, I could compete in the lowest category, which was 90 pounds. So I had no problems meeting the weight requirement, and I got quite successful at it and started winning some matches and intramural competition. And sure enough, over time, I started to get recognized amongst the school body. And there began the integration of myself within the school community. The reason why I was successful at wrestling is I was a little bit smart. I could understand the moves, I could understand the technique, and I would use them, and was successful at outmaneuvering my opponent. And we would have practices after school, and we would practice on each other all the moves that we needed. There was Greco-Roman wrestling, and I enjoyed it because I could actually compete with somebody that was equal to me in size, and that gave me a little bit of appreciation, I guess, or a little bit of encouragement. And in retrospect, had we stayed in Quebec, in comparison to where we are today as a family, we have grown so much as individuals, with a broader sense of appreciation for our Canadian country, for the world around us. You do understand the distinct culture that Quebec is, because I've lived there, I was born there, but you do appreciate English Canada as well. And I've come to understand both sides of these provinces. As part of the struggle of integrating our family into English Canada, there was a lot of challenges between mom and dad, and one of the casualties, I should say, of that move to Ontario back in 1969, early 70. My parents separated, and my mother moved back to Montreal. And by that time, I was a little bit older. The rest of the brothers and sisters were a little bit older, and my mom went back with two brothers, and the four of us, my brother Ben, my sister Chantal, and my sister Francine, moved out on our own, and started our lives on our own at that point in time. I was by that time 18 years old. That was a difficult time of a lot of brokenness happening at the same time. So when you start thinking about survival of yourself, you're focused on yourself, especially as a 17 or 18-year-old. And I remember my dad had somebody else move into the house, and then we found out there was another woman in the house, and it was turbulent times. But at the same time, we all kind of went on our own everywhere, and try to fetch for ourselves in the world, and yeah, it was. I don't remember when the house got sold or anything like that at all. I don't remember if my other brothers and sisters stayed in the house or if they went on their own, but we were pretty well out on our own at a very young age at that point in time, because there was no more family, basically, and it was a real transition of a family breakup. When you're faced with these obstacles and these challenges, you grow up, and there's something to be said about becoming a man. When you're on your own, having to fetch for yourself, and you're only responsible for yourself and your well-being, you do grow up, and you do become a man. And I don't want to make a big comparison to today's children today that are being coddled to the extent that they can't fetch for themselves on their own at 22, 23, 25, because they're just being nurtured to the extent where they're not given the skills to fetch for themselves, to grow and to mature and to become women and men. And that transfers into their lives forever. They're now 30, 40, 50 years old, and they're still kids. So there was a real strength of character development by having to fetch on your own and to take responsibility for your own welfare and your own well-being. I transitioned over to the workforce as a part-time student, as a part-time employee for the Insurance Crime Prevention Bureau in 1972 through a French alliance or a French connection with my parents, and I got a job as a summer student, and that was the beginning of my insurance career. And shortly thereafter, when I turned 18, left home through the family breakup, I went in full time. Again, through serendipity. I applied out of the Toronto Sun, a little job in Mississauga, and the person that was doing the hiring, I was playing badminton at a local community center with him. So he just gave me the job. I got in with very little training. As a matter of fact, pretty well none. And here I am, 50 years later. And the attraction back then was infinite learning. Here was an industry that I could sink my teeth into and never stop learning. And that was extremely appealing for me because I love learning. And so here we are. And I could not be more appreciative, filled with a sense of gratitude for the privilege that I've had to work in an industry where I've dedicated my entire life to. And I'm so grateful for what it's done for me as an individual and for my family. And 1972 was an interesting year because obviously the Canada-Russia series was going on with international hockey in the world tournament, on the world stage. And Paul Henderson was the star performer, scored the winning goals in the 6th, 7th, and 8th game to win the series. And the battle there was between democracy and communism. And so Paul Henderson was the catalyst to democracy of the Western world as compared to communism. And lo and behold, I would come to have Paul as a mentor years later as I sought to reconcile my life and find purpose for living and the reason why I was set on the earth for. And Paul was instrumental in leading me on that path at the age of 28 years old. At this point in my life, as something that I wouldn't change for the world. And you know, the struggle is sometimes the meaning of life. And it's in the struggle that we find ourselves and we become whole.